it presents to the user, how it ruins people's health. We want tobacco companies, which means in terms of users, to pay for the increased cost of medical care. So I got a question for you. How is legalizing a substance that we know to be more addictive and more dangerous than tobacco going to change things? It's illogical. It doesn't work that way. Illogical fixes usually puts us in worse situations. Again, if you look at Israel in some of his glory days, with just a few kings, but the nation as a whole went downhill morally. Yeah, David was the highlight of it, and Solomon had his greatness, but if you look at the morality of Israel overall, it went down. Within 3 generations, the nation was split in 2. The northern kingdom basically stopped following God. The southern nation's decline was more gradual, but it too declined. And in the end, we find God's statement about it in Hosea chapter 13. And keep in mind, these people wanted a king because they had corrupt judges. And we're going to fix the problem of corruption by throwing out the judges. In Hosea chapter 13, and in verse 9, God said, "It is your destruction, O Israel, that you are against me, against your health. Where now is your king, that he may save you in all your cities? And your judges of whom you requested, give me a king and princes. I gave you a king in my anger, and took him away in my wrath." Oh, they wanted kings. Did it make the thing better? God was saying, no, that wasn't a fix to the problem. You don't understand what the problem was. And in my anger, I gave you what you asked for, but that wasn't what you needed. Has the situation of children improved by allowing people to live together without marriage? No. So how is changing the meaning of marriage going to help? That's what we got going on right now. People wanting to change completely the meaning of what marriage is. I find it fascinating. We know what works. We acknowledge what works. So therefore we got to get rid of it. We know marriage is a better situation, so why do we feel that we have to change it? Or drugs. Will drugs become a more rarity if we legalize it? I think everybody knows. No, it's going to be more prevalent. Will marriages become steadier if we continue to accept adultery and fornication as normal? No. We know what's going to happen. We can see it all around us. It's falling apart. See, when God writes His laws, He doesn't write laws the way we think, fortunately. God doesn't think like men. In Isaiah 55, and in verse 9, "For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." God doesn't think the way we do. God actually knows what the outcomes are. And yet we have a notion that we can fix society's ills by moving away from the standards God set out for man. Here's where the root cause of the problem is. There's the reason why people are saying, well, marriage is the problem, let's get rid of it. Because they know that marriage is from God. And people want nothing to do with God anymore. In general. Anything that smacks of religion, of righteousness, of standards, people want to throw those out. And somehow believe that they're going to come up with a utopian society that's going to work out so much better. It doesn't take an intellectual giant to understand that man is too finite to decide between right and wrong. Our lives are too short. We don't see everything. That's why you find the statement in Jeremiah 10, in verse 23. Jeremiah 10, verse 23, I know, O Lord, that a man's way is not in himself, nor is it in a man who walks to direct his steps. We just don't have that ability. We live too short. We know too little. We don't have the ability to say this is what's right and this is what's wrong. Rather than looking to ourselves to say that we have the solution, what we really need is to have is this humble heart, willing to submit ourselves to God. In Matthew chapter 11. Matthew 11, and in verse 25. At that time Jesus answered and said, I praise thee, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that thou didst hide these things from the wise and intelligent, and didst reveal them to babes. It's the intellectuals of our society that are killing our society. God's wisdom is found by people who are willing to follow what God says. God is righteous. His ways are just. And when we follow God's commandments, our lives improve. The problem is whether we accept that or not. Whether we're willing to follow that or not. I'm going to talk more about that a little bit later. I have a lot longer lesson to talk about that. But I wanted to bring this issue up so we can start thinking about it. But for this morning, I want you to think about the fact that God's ways are always right. It's part of actually the nature of God. God is just. God is righteousness. And the reason why God gave us laws are for our good. They're not arbitrary. They're not just something he just decided, hey, everybody's got to get married, and that's the reason why we say no sex before marriage. Not just something you pulled out of the hat and say, hey, this is the way. He knows this works. There's a reason why he tells us be sober-minded. Drugs don't work. There's a reason why he's given us all sorts of laws about don't lie, don't steal. Because those things don't work in the long run. They ruin our lives. And God wants us to have good lives. So I want you to think about these things today, and if there's anyone here today who wishes to become a child of God, there is no better time than right now to put on Christ. If there is anyone here who is a child of God, like to pray to their brethren on behalf, why don't you come forward as we stand and sing the song selected.